Just hello and welcome to our new online event, sharing our story, Northern Ireland's Jewish heritage. I'm Wesley Geddes, and I'm Deputy Head of Records Management, Cataloguing and Access at PRONI. I'm delighted to welcome you here to this online talk. We're very sorry we can't obviously have you on site at PRONI today, obviously due to current restrictions, but I hope you really have a great time listening to the various talks that we have lined up for you. I'll just spend a minute or two just going through some points of housekeeping before we start. Just to say, your cameras are turned on. If you want to have them turned off, by all means do so, but you are on mute throughout the course of the presentations. If you want to comment or ask a question, by all means, you can do that by using the chat function that you all have available to you. The main event itself, the various talks will be taking about 40 minutes to complete, and after that there'll be a question and answer session, and the panel members will be able to take those questions at the end. So I think that's all I have to say, but in the meantime, I hope you enjoy the talks. I'm really excited, looking forward to hear what they'll have to say. And I'll pass you over now to our first speaker, who is Stephen Jaffe. So Stephen, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Wesley, and shalom to everyone. Good afternoon and a very happy Hanukkah, because today is the 4th day of the festival of Hanukkah. And Hanukkah as a festival is very much focused on the physical and spiritual survival of the Jewish people. So it's a very appropriate day to have this event, and a big thank you to the Public Record Office of Northern Ireland for hosting the event. I'm directing the Jewish Heritage project, and what we're trying to do is to preserve, identify and promote the source material of the Belfast Jewish community. We have been very fortunate to receive a grant from the Shared History Fund, which is being administered by the National Lottery Heritage Fund. And that's enabled us really to take a step up in our activity in trying to ensure that the history of the Jewish community of Northern Ireland is properly remembered. And we've had the assistance and help of a wide range of organizations and individuals in doing that. So this is a wonderful opportunity for me to say thank you to not just the Public Record Office, who've been fantastic, also Queen's University Belfast Special Collections, which have digitized much of the source material, including, for example, the community magazine, the Belfast Jewish Record. So that is available online, which is an amazing resource. Individual researchers in Northern Ireland have investigated different aspects of the history of the Jewish community of Northern Ireland, whether it's during the Holocaust period, the refugees that came to Northern Ireland, whether it's the veterans, the members of the Belfast Jewish community who served in the World Wars, whether it's the city cemetery, the Jewish section there, the Lurgan Hebrew congregation. There is a wealth of activity going on at local history level regarding the history of our community. And it's an opportunity for me to say thank you for all the people who are involved in that. But listen, it's really up to all of us to ensure that the history of the Jewish community is properly remembered and preserved. And that includes the members of the Belfast Jewish community, former members now living all over the world, their descendants, wherever they may be, and indeed friends of the Belfast Jewish community. I know there are many people in Northern Ireland who remember the Jewish people that perhaps they went to school with or they worked alongside. And your memories, your photographs, documents relating to the Belfast Jewish community is all very important. So we all have a huge part to play in ensuring the success of this project. The wonderful Belfast Jewish community has had an amazing history going back 150 years. This is a community, let's not forget, which can point to a head of state, a president of the state of Israel that was born in Belfast, a chief rabbi of the Holy Land, that is the most senior position in the Jewish world, who was rabbi in Belfast. not one foreign minister, but two foreign ministers who lived in Belfast, Foreign Minister of Israel, a Foreign Minister of the Soviet Union. We can point to a Belfast-born Jew who was an Oscar winner. Even the founder of Häagen-Dazs, for goodness sake, was a Jewish person who lived in Belfast for a period. So in addition to all of these people who starred on a world stage, we are keen also to capture the history of the ordinary members of the Belfast Jewish community, those who made in their own right an enormous contribution to the cultural life of Northern Ireland, the economic life as a faith community, the various activities of the community. And I'm delighted this afternoon to introduce a number of guests who are going to speak, all of whom have made a wonderful contribution to the project going forward. And this gives them an opportunity to showcase what they've done, which is wonderful. So our first speaker is going to be Bernard Enlander. Bernard was born in Belfast in 1949. He grew up in Belfast. He's a Queen's University graduate. And in 1973, he left Belfast in line with many of his friends and contemporaries at that time to go and live in England. But he has many family members in Northern Ireland, and certainly pre-COVID days, he enjoyed his visits, his regular visits back to Northern Ireland. Bernard has done amazing work regarding his own family history, and he's going to share with us this afternoon both his insights regarding his own family's experience in Northern Ireland, but for all of us to show us the kind of source material that's available at the Public Record Office, online, in newspapers, etc., which we can all look at to take to investigate our own family histories. Our second speaker is going to be Amanda Jackson. Many of you may remember her as Amanda Moss. Also Belfast born, Amanda was born near contemporary of mine in 1967. She left Belfast in 1986, has lived in London since then. Amanda works in local authority. She's involved in social care, and she's been very active in the Jewish community. Going back, I remember in Belfast, Amanda involved in the youth work of the Belfast Jewish community, and right through to today, Amanda very active in the Jewish community in North London where she lives. Amanda has deposited some papers, records relating to her family's connection, in particular to the last kosher butchers in Belfast. And Amanda is going to share with us this afternoon her memories and her, well, it's a very emotional thing, I am sure, her connections with Victuallers, which was a kosher butchers on the Antrim Road there. Our third speaker is going to be Lorraine Burke of the Public Records Office of Northern Ireland. Lorraine is the head of the private records at PRONI. Lorraine, it's an opportunity for me to thank you for your amazing proactive support for the project and the enthusiasm that you bring. It's an absolute pleasure to work alongside with you. And you're going to give us a taste this afternoon of some of the existing records that the Public Record Office of Northern Ireland has, which sheds light on the history of the Jewish community in Northern Ireland. Once the speakers have delivered their presentations, we're going to have a Q&A session. People should leave the questions on using the chat facility, and I will be chairing that session with you. So thank you, that's enough from me, and I'm now going to hand over to Bernard to give his presentation.
Thank you, Stephen. I hope I can live up to your intro. So let me just go into share screen. And hopefully everyone can see this now. Okay, so the early Enlander family history. This is a picture of my grandparents, or my Esther and Chaim Enlander, my Bubba and Zeta, as we used to call them, which was the Yiddish equivalent for grandma and grandpa. The picture was taken about 1952. That's me in the middle, not realizing it sort of 70 years later, I'd be looking back at myself like this. my brother Morris on the left-hand side, and my cousin Gary on the right. So it's a very comfortable and peaceful picture, and it's quite hard to believe that my grandparents had come without their parents and their siblings from Lublin, which was in Russia then, now in Poland, only 50 years earlier. So they come speaking, obviously, no English. They probably spoke Yiddish. They certainly spoke Yiddish and maybe some Polish. They probably had very few possessions. So I knew very little about their earlier life, something I regret not asking them about when I was younger. So let's have a look at what I've managed to find out using various internet resources and other stuff that's available. So just a quick overview of the family history. My great-great-grandfather came from Zamość in Poland. One of his sons was Baruch Aaron Enlander. This is my great-grandfather. He married Bracha Glover. They got married in Lublin in 1887. And Glover, originally the name was Clavier, but the Glover name is well known in Belfast as well. Anyhow, they are the two that came over to Ireland, probably in 1904, so early 1900s. They came over with 4 children. My great-grandfather Chaim, who was born in Lublin, he married my grandmother Esther. She came from Glasgow originally. There was another son called Harry, who died quite young. There was a son called Benny, who later married Hilde Keitzer, and their son was Derek Enlander, who a lot of you probably know, many of you know. And again, there was Pearl, also born in Lublin, and she married Jack Schlafer, later Jack Smith. Their grandson, Mike Smith, lived in Belfast for a while in the late 60s and early 70s. So these are the ones that came over to Ireland. Why did they come to Belfast? Well, there was some of the Glover family were living here already. So I think the connection was through Bracha Glover. There was a couple of other kids that they had when they were here. And this is a picture of them in sort of late about 1917 or 1918. The earliest records I could find were from the Regent Park School, which later became the Jaffe School. So these are from 1906. And here we can see registrations for Harry Enlander, Benny Enlander, and Pearl Enlander. My grandfather Chaim is not there. Probably he was too old for school in those days. I guess he would have been about 13 or 14 at the time. The family were flagged as Jewish. They lived in Fortingale Street. My great-grandfather was a traveler as such, which really in those days meant a peddler, and they were flagged as coming from Russia. And these records have been provided by PRONI, and again, there's a whole incredible source of names that are on these school records of people that I remember from my youth. Other useful records are birth, marriage, and death certificates, which you can get from the General Registry Office in Northern Ireland. And here's an example of one of the Sarah Enlander, who was born to my great-grandparents, so a sister of my grandfather. She was born at home, again, Fortingale Place, and this was in 1906. And another useful source is the Belfast Street Directories, which are published by Lennon Wiley. They're online, and they're not for every year, but you can quite easily track through the various places where people live. So looking at my great-grandfather, Baruch Enlander, so 1907, Fortingale Street is where he lived, which ties up with the school records. And it's interesting to notice lots of other Jewish names that are on the street at the time. Again, he's flagged as a traveler, a peddler. By 1908, he had to move, I don't know why, to Bristol Street. 1910, he'd moved to Unity Street. And then they settled for a while in Bedique Street for quite a few years. You can notice the difference in the spellings of the names as we go through. And this is one of the tribulations of trying to track back through past records. Just a quick note about where they were living. This is an Ordnance Survey map of the Carlisle Circus area in Belfast in the 1920s. The synagogue, which was opened in 1904, is there on Annesley Street. And the locations of where my grandparents were living is all this area here, which was really a Jewish enclave in those days. Lots and lots of Jewish families were living there. I don't know again why they had to move around so much, but you can see it's all in this area of the synagogue. Some other useful sources: the Queen's University digital collection, which Stephen's mentioned. Here's from 1933, the Belfast Jewish Gazette, a New Year greeting from Benny Enlander. The Jewish Chronicle is also very useful. Again, the archive, this is from 1924. There's an engagement notice about Harry Enlander, one of my grandfather's brothers, again, using the Bedique Street address where he was at the time. The census information for 1911 is shown here. They weren't here for the 1901 census. And again, this is online, and they do provide a transcription, as it's pretty difficult to read. But here you can see my great-grandparents, and then the children, Benny, Harry, and Pearl. My grandfather, Chaim, is not there. It's possible that I think he was apprenticed over in Glasgow at the time. So anyhow, here we are flagged as Jews, Jewesses, whether they could read or write. It's probably English as opposed to Yiddish, Polish. Again, my great-grandfather was a traveler. Benny was flagged as a cap maker. Harry is a traveler, and Pearl is a scholar, which I think meant she was just at school. Again, from Russia, and could they speak the Irish language? Well, it's fairly obviously no. They seem to have written Jew there and then scored out the column. And again, this was done while they were in Bedique Street. So there's you're sort of looking back at the past here, looking at this original record, which I find some of this stuff quite amazing. My great-grandfather was a traveler, and just to give some insight in what a traveler actually involved, this is a record that I found from the Petty Session Court in Hillcrest and Court in Roscommon for my grandfather's brother, Harry Enlander, who was brought to court for a couple of offences for a vehicle on the public highway at night. It was 10:45 at night, without a lighted lamp attached, a shilling fine, and also for being a road nuisance, willfully or negligently not properly in control of his horse and cart, again with a shilling fine. I'm not quite sure what that involved, but a pint of beer in those days was twopence, and a shilling fine, 2 shillings fine was quite hefty. Roscommon was about 120 miles away from Belfast, so to be a traveller in those days with your horse and cart and selling bits and pieces off the back of the cart must have been a very a very difficult life indeed. And also his father was doing the same as well. Naturalization papers from my grandfather, this was, again in 1928. These are actual documents, but you can find them online as well. And this is where the name Enlander was actually changed to Enlander formally, again born in Lublin. My Benny Enlander and Chaim Enlander both went on to open shops. Benny Enlander and some others opened Bennett's stores, which nothing over 5 shillings was one of their adverts in the Belfast Telegraph. And again, they had some other stores that were opened as well. My grandfather, Chaim, had a toy and fancy goods shop in Bridgend. And again, this is a Bridge, not anymore. And at this time in Belfast, the late 20s, early 30s, there was an explosion of enterprise, of various businesses and shops being opened up by the new wave of immigrants and their children. And perhaps that could be the subject of another talk. An interesting exchange in 1936 in the newspapers, in the Belfast Telegraph, and I'll just look at the newsletter. There was a robbery in the shop where, in my grandfather's shop in Bridgend, where they stole razor blades, fountain pens, hair clippers, and so on, £12. It says here Enlander is a Jew, who is a Jew, and the course was asked why he didn't sell English razors instead of German ones. He replied, there were no English razors, except there were schmatters, as they say, very cheap, which were useless. And the judge asked, well, hair clippers, they were Japanese, and the fountain pens, where they come from, Japanese as well. So hilarious laughter. It all sounds a very innocuous exchange, but a few days later, in the Belfast Telegraph, this letter was published by Philip Garfunkel, who was a solicitor, on behalf of my grandfather, which said that the readers of this may have presumed Mr. Enlander was solely in foreign goods. He wants to correct that impression that 80% of his stock is British manufacture, and he asks these facts are published so his business may not suffer through misleading publicity. My grandfather had a very strong foreign accent. It would have been stronger at that time. I don't know if this is a reflection of anti-Semitism or brewing World War II coming up. But there was stuff in the newspapers about persecutions in Germany as well. So hard to know. So to finish off, we come to the Jewish cemetery, and there's loads of community history here, both personal history and also community history. This is the tombstones for my great-grandparents, again, Baruch and Bracha Enlander. And the custom in a lot of Jewish families is to give a new child the name of a deceased relative. And the name of my grandfather, Baruch Aaron, as I've said, is my name. In fact, it's my Hebrew name. So there's quite a close linkage for me in this talk, talking about my great-grandfather, who died about 6 years before I was born. This is his my grandfather, Chaim. Again, you can see this, so the son of Baruch Aaron, and again the tombstones for Benny and Henle Enlander and Jack and Pearl Smith. So again, you have this history of Jewish names as well, and the Komani graveyard and the city graveyard is also a great source of family history. Anyhow, that's some background to this picture, and I'll stop screen sharing now, and hopefully it's given you some idea of the early story of the Enlander family. A lot of us will remember grandparents or parents who spoke Yiddish at home, who had foreign accents. We've seen some hard facts here, but there's a lot of gaps in the story. How did they journey over? How did they learn English? What was early life in Belfast? How did they manage to prosper? And as Stephen has mentioned, perhaps some of you have got information that could fill in some of these gaps for the community, documents or letters or memories or so on that could be collated and documented and passed on. So thank you very much. And now I think I pass you over to Amanda.
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you for asking me to speak today. I am going to talk about my recollections of my grandfather's butcher shop, but I would like to say that they're my personal recollections. It's certainly not a scientific talk, so I'm just going to share my screen. And sorry, just give me 1 second there. Oh, for some reason, it's not letting me go into slideshow. Ah, there we go. Lovely. So, as I said, it's not a scientific or talk, and this is not a talk either about the history of kosher meat or how we come to have kosher meat. If you want to know about that, there's Google. So this picture is of my grandparents, my father's father and mother, on their wedding day in 1934. But I'm going to take you back a little bit before then. My grandfather, Abraham Joseph Moss, was born in Manchester in 1913. He was orphaned by the time he was 6, and largely he was brought up by his eldest sister and her husband. They happened to have a butcher's shop. And at some point, probably around 1927, they sold their butcher's shop to another local butcher who at some point between 1927 and when they got married in 1934, moved to Belfast, relocated to Belfast and brought the butcher's business with them. And in fact, my grandfather, who was known as Abe in Manchester, people would know him as Joe Moss in Belfast, but I called him Papa. So Papa moved to Belfast more or less as a fixture and fitting of the butcher's shop. And that's how he came to be here. And in the years leading up to the wedding in 1934, obviously, not quite sure exactly of all the dates, but met and married my grandmother, who was living in Belfast, and her family had been here for some time. So the man who bought the butcher shop and brought Papa over was a gentleman called Mott, or in English, Mark Nemtsov, and he ran the butcher shop from 2730, we're not quite sure exactly when, until the early 70s. And he very much was like a family member because, as I said, my grandfather was orphaned so young. He really looked up to Uncle Moss, and we called him Uncle Moss. And my father really looked at him as a grandfather. And he, in the mid-70s, retired. He did have children who were born in Belfast, but didn't stay in Belfast. And they didn't want to take over the business. And at that point, Victuallers, which was the family business, was gifted, handed over, sold to my grandfather. And I should just say that Victuallers wasn't the only kosher butcher shop in Belfast. There was another butcher shop called Diamonds, although by the time I was born, it was no longer in existence. But I have heard the story that when Victuallers were advertising, they used to tell people that their meat was better than jewels. So perhaps there was no love lost between the two shops. I don't know. So this was the actual shop. It was on the Antrim Road, as you can see, 499 Antrim Road, just near the top of Glandore Avenue, and next door to a shop which was called Levy's, was originally owned by the Levy family and then later by a gentleman called Mr. Armstrong. So some people used to refer to it as Levy's and some people used to refer to it as Armstrong. But back to Victuallers next door. As you can see on the note paper, it was the finest lamb and poultry, corned beef and pickled tongues. And there was a whole range of kosher meat in Belfast at that time. Until in the mid-80s, in fact, it was no longer viable to be making some of the processed meats in the shop. And my father, in fact, although he was never part of the butcher's business, did used to do business across all of Ireland, and he was often found driving backwards and forwards from Belfast to from Dublin to Belfast with a bootload of saveloys and salami. I'm not sure that that was anything to do with any precursor to Brexit and any sausage wars that there are now, but he certainly did used to bring it. The meat was killed locally. The ritual slaughterer, terrible term, used to either, well, there was one living in the community, or we used to share one with Dublin, and he would be coming backwards and forwards to the abattoir. The shop was always like a family. If you see the picture in the middle, you've got Uncle Mott, and the gentleman next to him was called Jimmy. Now, Jimmy started working for the business in 1948, and his wedding picture is actually on the right of the picture. And Uncle Mott's wife and my grandmother are right next to them in the family wedding picture. And Jimmy stayed with the business until 1984, though he did leave apparently in 1974 for a little while, but my grandfather managed to persuade him to come back. And at the heyday, there were quite a lot of people working in the shop, but when the 70s, when I remember, there was Jimmy and there was one other person who worked called Tommy, but they were very much part of the family. And we knew them and their families very, very well. Now, a big part of my memory revolves around the shop vans. Every time there was a new van, it was a big, exciting happening in the family. And it was at the time when, if you remember, models used to be displayed lying across the bonnet of cars in motor shows. I don't think that happens now. So it wasn't always my choice, as you can see from the picture on the right, but I was always deposited on the van. There was always a big van and a little van. And one of my memories was that in the week we had Hebrew classes at the synagogue, and I would be collected in the van. Either Tommy or Jimmy would come to collect me. And I remember it was very, very cold because as you may or may not know, in the back of a butcher's van, it is steel lined. And I very often had to sit in the back with the parcels of meat. Unfortunately, the steel lining was also attractive in other ways. And I remember phone calls on a fairly regular basis, unfortunately, where the vans were hijacked. And either Tommy or Jimmy would be phoning up saying, "Can you come and pick me up? I've been hijacked." Sometimes Papa got the van back, and sometimes he didn't. And I'll leave it to your imagination what happened with the vans. Now, talking of the Troubles, something that could only really happen in Northern Ireland, as you may be aware, it's quite a Jewish delicacy to have salt beef. And salt beef is pickled, and part of the pickling requires saltpeter. Saltpeter is also can be used in explosives. And so that probably my papa was the only butcher who actually had to get an explosives license every year to be able to pickle his salt beef. And I found in the records that I found from the shop, I found quite a number of applications for his saltpeter license. I'm not sure if saltpeter is still used in the salt beef pickling process, because I understand it's really not very good for you, but that's what was going on then. And so we come to the 1980s or the late 70s. Papa was very much a part of the community, as I said, in the Antrim Road area. He was well known. He had customers across all of the communities, not just the Jewish community. I remember, I think it was about 1978, that Little Flower Primary School, which I think is Somerton Road, were doing a production of Fiddler on the Roof, which, for those of you who may know, it features a Jewish butcher. And so my papa was the Jewish consultant to the Little Flower Primary School. And I remember going with him to see the production. As you can see, the shop had to be boarded up at night. A lot of security was needed. And I guess that was a sign of the times. Another sign of the times, partly from the Troubles, partly for other reasons, the Jewish community started to decline during the 80s, and customer numbers were going down. He did actually have some new customers at that stage from the Muslim community who were moving into the area, and there were not yet halal butchers in Belfast. And as Muslims can eat kosher, although Jews can't eat halal, he did have some customers from the Muslim community. Amongst the Jewish community, as I said, people were moving away. Other people, for their own reasons, chose not to buy from his shop and to buy their meat perhaps over the border in Dublin, as there was a border then, or even to bring it in from England. And that was very difficult because in a small community, a business relies obviously on all of the people to shop there. Also, rents were increasing. He did ask for a subsidy from the community, but the Jewish community wasn't in a position to be able to agree to that at that time. He was a very passionate man and passionate about serving the community and providing the very best meat. He was quite emotional, not always the easiest to get along with, but he was very hurt by what he felt, and obviously other people have different recollections, but what he felt was lack of support. And it began to affect his health. He had to close the shop for a while in the mid-80s due to ill health. There was nobody else to take it over. And finally, in 1986, 87, he was already in his 70s, and he shut up shop and for the last time and retired. So as I said, it's very much my personal recollections of the time in the 70s and 80s when he was running the butcher shop. Other people will remember him as customers going in, or perhaps as customers of diamonds not going in, I don't know. But to me, obviously, he was a grandfather and the butcher shop will always hold very special memories in my heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda.
Sorry,
That's fine. Thank you, Amanda. I'll take over and lead on the next talk here. It's my great pleasure to be part of today's event, and I'm delighted that so many people were able to join us. I see, looking at the screen there at the bottom, I see we have over 180 people at the moment in the audience, which is truly amazing. So thank you all for joining us today. I'll just share my screen now, so bear with me. So to begin, for those of you in the audience who aren't too familiar with the Public Records Office of Northern Ireland, or PRONI, I'll just say a few words by way of introduction. So PRONI was established in 1923 and is the official archive for Northern Ireland. We operate as part of the Department for Communities, and we're based in Belfast in the Titanic Quarter. PRONI cares for over 3 million records that relate mainly, but not exclusively, to Northern Ireland. PRONI has a statutory responsibility to preserve official records, so the records of government departments, non-departmental public bodies, and all sorts of records relating to local administration, so church records or school records. However, many people mightn't be aware that PRONI also has a huge holding of records that have come to us from private depositors. In fact, over a third of our records are from private depositors, including churches, businesses, charities, families, and individuals, such as Amanda, our previous speaker. We're open to the public, but unfortunately, as Wesley mentioned in his introduction to today's event, we have been affected by COVID, which has meant that events like today's event have had to be delivered online, and also in terms of members of the public coming into PRONI, we're operating on an appointment-only basis at the moment. But at the same time, you can browse or search through over 1 million catalogue descriptions on the PRONI e-catalogue. And we also have a range of digitized online resources available on our website, including, say, digitized copies of street directories, which Bernard highlighted in his talk earlier on. I don't have much time today, unfortunately, so I'll only be able to just highlight some of the records that PRONI holds from both private and official sources that provide an insight into the Jewish community in Northern Ireland. And one name that features time and time again in our archives is that of Sir Otto Jaffe, the businessman and philanthropist who was twice appointed Lord Mayor of Belfast and who made such an enormous contribution to the city and to all of its citizens. Bernard has already mentioned the Jaffe Memorial School in his talk and just highlighted what an important source of information it was to him in his family history research. And this school was entirely funded by Sir Otto, and was very, very progressive in its approach to education and operated, it was ahead of its times in so many ways. It operated on an entirely non-denominational basis. So PRONI holds the registers for the forerunner to the Jaffe School, which, as Bernard mentioned, was Regent Street School, and also the records to the Jaffe Memorial School itself, dating from 1907, I beg your pardon, until its closure in 1957. Sir Otto's father had financed Belfast's first synagogue on Great Victoria Street, and Sir Otto made the largest contribution by far to the building of the second synagogue on Ainsley Street. Now, unfortunately, we don't hold any architectural drawings or plans for the Ainsley Street Synagogue in PRONI, but thankfully the very detailed building specifications for the synagogue, which were prepared by Young and Mackenzie architects, who were the project architects for the building, we do hold. And as we can see here, just from one of the images that I have on my slide, as I say, they're very detailed. We see details there for the architraves and the pews on the ground floor there in my slide. The letter on the right is a letter from Sir Otto, dated to 1904, looking forward to conferring with Young and Mackenzie architects on the project. Moving on then, I just want to mention a couple of sources relating to two other prominent members of the Jewish community in Northern Ireland. Again, sadly, time doesn't allow me to go into much detail, but another person who emerges strongly from the archives is Rabbi Jacob Schachter, who was appointed rabbi to Belfast in 1923, and again, who made such a huge impact, not just on his own contribution, but in terms of cultural and civic life in Belfast. I just have one record here relating to Rabbi Schachter. This is a Home Affairs, Ministry of Home Affairs file, Northern Ireland Ministry of Home Affairs file. And in it, there are papers from Rabbi Schachter applying on behalf of an individual who the congregation wished to bring over on a trial basis to act as the post of reader, ritual slaughterer and circumciser. The individual was based in Belgium and would have needed special permission to come over to Belfast. So Rabbi Schachter, in the papers on this file, he's applying for special leave and asking the Ministry of Home Affairs in Northern Ireland to apply to liaise with the Home Office in London. Officials locally say no, they turn down the application. Rabbi Schachter persists, they say no again. He turns up for meetings unannounced. They relent, and a special license or special permission is granted. But just from the letters on the file, he just really comes to life for me. You can just tell what a determined and forceful figure he was, you know, and how strongly he acted on behalf of his community. There's also another lovely file there that has some papers in it relating to Rabbi Schachter's retirement ceremony, which was attended by the Lord Mayor and other dignitaries. On the right of the slide there, we're very fortunate to hold the personal papers of another fascinating individual, Solomon Solly Lipsitch, the person credited with popularizing jazz music in Northern Ireland. So Solly Lipsitch earned the nickname of Mr. Jazz because of his efforts in promoting, reviewing, and importing jazz music into the city of Belfast from the 1950s onwards, a time when there was no large-scale supply of jazz music records to the city. A lovely, lovely collection for anyone that is able to come into PRONI and look through some of the records within it. Moving on then, as Stephen outlined at the beginning of the event, the Jewish Heritage Project is operating on the basis that it wishes to locate, document and preserve records relating to the Jewish community, not just in Belfast, but throughout the whole of Northern Ireland. And PRONI is delighted to support this project by cataloguing and preserving records and making them publicly available in PRONI. They will be any records deposited as part of the project and deposited with PRONI will be held under the catalogue reference number D4809. And I just want to stress that as part of the process, it is not necessary at all to transfer ownership of any documents to PRONI. Stephen has already deposited a copy of Rabbi Gedalia Silverstone's second publication with us, a publication that dates to 1903. And of course, Amanda, who spoke earlier, has deposited the papers of her late father, Harold Moss, his papers relating to Amanda's grandfather and Victualler's butchers, which we just heard about a short time ago. And I want to take this opportunity to thank Amanda sincerely for depositing those records with PRONI. Myself and my colleague Rebecca, who catalogued the papers recently, we thoroughly enjoyed cataloguing the papers. And Amanda, we showed everyone that was in the office those explosive licenses as well. We had never come across them before in any of PRONI's other collections. But really, Amanda brought the papers and brought her grandfather to life so vividly there in her talk. I just thought it would be useful for people just to see a screenshot of PRONI's catalog, our internal catalog, you know, that we use, and to explain how we structure a collection. So as I said, there's an overall catalog number for the Belfast Jewish Heritage Project. Any papers that are deposited with PRONI will be contained in different sections of that overall collection. And by doing this, we're able to acknowledge specific depositors, such as Amanda's late father, Harold. And we are also able to structure the catalogue in such a way. This is just the upper level catalogue descriptions, the archive level descriptions, but we catalogue each document, each individual photograph or explosive license or whatever down to item level. And doing that enables us, if we need to put closures on any particular documents for data protection or other reasons, we can do so. We're also ensuring when we catalogue the records, as I hope you can see there on the screen, we're able to highlight key individuals, key locations, so that people who are searching PRONI's on-site or online catalogue by keyword will be able to bring back search results that will link them into the relevant catalogue entries. Stephen and Bernard a few weeks previously provided me with the names of over 100 shops and businesses that were owned by members of the Jewish community in Northern Ireland. And myself and my colleagues have searched PRONI's catalogues, and to be honest, we only hold records relating to a handful of shops. And I think the papers of Victuallers Limited that we heard about earlier shows that how even a small collection, it's about 3 boxes of records that Amanda deposited with us, even a small collection of business papers can provide an insight into the community that it served and the times that it operated in. So just to go back to the point that that Stephen mentioned at the beginning of the event, and Bernard and Amanda have reinforced, no matter what you might have at home, if it you know, you might think, oh, it's not significant, but in fact it's all part of a bigger picture, and absolutely is. Some of the records that PRONI holds have a significance beyond the local Jewish community. And these include files that outline the response by the Northern Ireland government to the Jewish refugee crisis in the years before the outbreak of the Second World War. From 1937 onwards, officials in Northern Ireland sought to attract refugee industrialists to establish new businesses in Northern Ireland under the New Industries Act, 1937 Act. There was an earlier version of the Act in 1932. So it was mainly officials in the Ministry of Commerce who played the lead role, I suppose, in these attempts, and they scrutinised the applications and made recommendations to the Home Office in London. And Ministry of Commerce files dating from 1938 in PRONI contain literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of applications, mainly from Jewish people living in Vienna, applying to set up business in Northern Ireland. And as well as, you know, bare bones information, names and addresses, the letters of application can also include photographs, personal information, information about the businesses that people already had, and can provide a range of supporting information. I've just highlighted 2 applications here on my slide. On the left there, we have an application by 19-year-old Lore Steininger on behalf of herself and her 15-year-old sister Helga to establish a studio for arts and crafts was what they applied for in Northern Ireland, and in an effort to instruct and employ people locally. And their application was dated the 27th of August, 1938. Another application there from a similar date and from Vienna was by Oscar Weiss, a butcher living in Vienna, on behalf of himself and his 13-year-old daughter. And in his application, he simply writes, "Through the altered situation in Vienna, I am compelled to emigrate and look for a new existence." So a hugely significant set of records there. And through the project and with assistance from an intern from Queen's University Belfast, we hope to improve the catalogue descriptions of a good proportion of these files, so that the catalogue descriptions will contain the details of individual applications, so people will be able to search by name through our catalogue, which will be an important addition to our descriptions. Sorry, moving on quickly then. PRONI, we hold, as I said, 3 million records. They come in a range of formats, and in 2018, we took in UTV's film and tape archive, which was a new and scary departure from us, but which has been wonderful to work on as well. We've been fortunate in that we're working in partnership with Northern Ireland Screen to preserve and digitize key elements of the archive. Funding from the Broadcasting Authority of Ireland and from our own Department of Communities has enabled us over this last year to digitise the earliest film footage in the UTV archive, which dates from 1959. Where possible, any material that's digitised is made freely available on Northern Ireland Screen's digital film archive, and well worth having a look. I've put the link there in my slide, because there are a number of films within the digital film archive, a number of clips that I think will be of interest to members of the Jewish community locally and beyond. So one of them includes a lovely interview with Harold Goldblatt, founder of the group Theatre, and just also a past pupil of Jaffe Memorial School, just out of interest. But and then there's another lovely clip. It's only 50 seconds long. It dates from 1964, and it just records the stone laying ceremony at the Belfast Synagogue on the Somerton Road. And I'm just going to play this clip now, hopefully, if technology doesn't fail me. And Stephen has kindly offered to just identify some people in the clip as I'm playing it. So I'll just play that now.
Thank you, Lorraine. It's a silent film, so you're not missing anything by hearing me. So what we're looking at is the spiritual and lay leadership of the community. Rabbi Karlbach at the time, we saw Barney Fox, the president of the community. That's him with the top hat. There was we had a quick glimpse at Judge Fox, another of the lay leaders of the community. This was 1964 and the opening of the current synagogue, which is on Somerton Road in Belfast. A huge crowd there at the time. If only we could muster and gather a similar crowd in the Belfast Jewish community today. But it's a wonderful building, an award-winning building in its day.
Thank you, Stephen. So I'll finish up now just by putting just some information on my final slide. We hope to make that the link to that clip that I just showed available on our Facebook page. So please keep an eye on PRONI's Facebook page over the coming days. If anyone is interested or wants further information about any of the records that I mentioned today, please contact me through our Access at Communities email address there on the slide. And I've also put up the contact details there for PRONI's website and PRONI's e-catalogue. So I'll finish up now and hand back to Stephen.
Thank you, Lorraine. Well, fascinating presentations there from Bernard, Amanda, and you, Lorraine, looking at different aspects of the community from different perspectives. We are coming up to the end of the session, so we haven't got time, I'm afraid, to go through all the questions that we've been asked, but I'm going to carry on slightly beyond the 4 o'clock time that we were due to end to raise some of the questions that have been asked. Ed remembers the Jewish family he lived beside, and he says, Bernard, are you related? He said Stanley, but it's Sydney and Zelda Enlander. Well, I'll answer for you, Bernard. Bernard's their nephew, but yes, a lot of people remembering Jewish families that they came across, both as neighbours, going to school with them, working colleagues, etc. A couple of questions came in about refugees. Debbie wanted to know about the Malal farm and the kinder transport refugees in particular who ended up at the farm, and what sources were available for that. Elise, I think it was asking, well, how many of these applicants for new industries in Northern Ireland, writing to the Northern Ireland government in the late 1930s under severe Nazi persecution, how many of them actually were successful? Well, on the question about Malal, the Jaffe school registers, which both Lorraine and Bernard mentioned, lists all the kinder transport who attended that school when they were in Belfast. And later on, at the time of the Blitz, they were moved out to the existing refugee farm at Malal. Regarding the refugees who came to Northern Ireland to establish businesses, well, this is something that I know the Public Record Office is going to invest time in looking in more detail, in particular at that archive, that collection of letters coming from Europe, and following through what indeed happened. But I can tell you, Bernard and I did some initial research on this, and it is amazing. There were factories opened in 5 Mile Town, in Newtonards, in Portadown, all by people who came to Northern Ireland from Nazi-dominated Europe and to re-establish their businesses there. Another very significant case was Shrigley in County Down, the opening of the tannery there. So that there are all sorts of examples, but more research definitely needs to be done on that. Amanda, I'm going to ask you a question, because you've been through the process of having to go through family papers and making that decision to donate it to the Public Record Office in Northern Ireland. How important do you think that is? And so the people who are tuning in, what would you say to them regarding papers and documents that they have?
Well, this time last year, unfortunately, I lost my father. And over the last year, I have been clearing out his house. Neither of my parents threw very much away in their lifetimes. And as well as the papers relating to the butcher shop, there were a number of papers and programs and leaflets relating to youth events, community events, committee events, etc., all part of the Jewish community. Belfast and Jewish Belfast are very, very close to my heart. I think I'll probably always refer to Belfast as home. And the Jewish community is so much a part of the history of Northern Ireland that I haven't got room to keep everything in my house. And I really wanted them to be preserved, and I really wanted to make sure that they live on, and the memories of my parents' generation, my grandparents, and everybody else, that their generation lives on. And so when I discovered that you were doing a lot of work on the archives of the community sadly has so few people left living in Belfast, probably more expats now than there are people living in the community. I really felt it was important that the documents were preserved for such times as sadly there may be even fewer people living there. So I think for anyone who's thinking about it, or anyone who's got any family papers, it would be really nice to bring us all together again, even if it's only in document form.
Absolutely, and to ensure that for our children and grandchildren and remoter descendants, that they will have something to actually remember the community by. And indeed, that's not just important for members of the community and their descendants, but also for people in Northern Ireland generally, because it is the community's history is an important part of the province's history. Somebody was asking me about the photograph that we used to publicize this event, which you will have seen when you registered on the Eventbrite page, asking, well, what was it showing? It's an event from 1928, and it was a visitor to the synagogue. He was the Duke of Abercorn, the governor of Northern Ireland. The younger woman with him was his daughter, Lady Catherine Hamilton, and they were being welcomed at Belfast Synagogue by quite a young-looking Rabbi Schachter. So that was in the year 1928, a wonderfully evocative photograph of the history of the community. There are a lot of people both sharing their own family recollections on the chat box and also one or two questions. I'm afraid we're not going to have time to get to them. To contact Belfast Jewish Heritage, and I will always try and respond to any queries you've got. I put the email address there on the chat. It's belfastjewishheritage@yahoo.com. We've also got a Facebook page, so if you're on Facebook, please do give us a like. I think a kind of a lasting outcome of the project, thanks to the support of the Shared History Fund, is that we're going to have an interactive map. This is going to be a map of Northern Ireland with about 60 locations on it, all telling a Jewish story. So people will be able to click on the locations to find out more about the Jewish aspect. And these could be former synagogues, places of business, schools, some of them we've mentioned, the Lurgan Hebrew congregation, the Londonderry Hebrew congregation, the impact of Jewish people on culture, people like Helen Lewis, the dancer. We've heard about Harold Goldblatt, the actor, and Solly Lipschitz and jazz. There's a whole story to be told about the cultural contribution of the Jewish community as well. So that will be hopefully going live in the new year. So a lot of exciting things happening. I want to finish by inviting Mukesh Sharma to say a few words. Mukesh is the chair of the National Lottery Heritage Fund Northern Ireland Committee and a trustee, a man who feels very passionately about preserving heritage. So I'm going to hand over to you, Mukesh.
Thank you very much, Stephen. And first of all, can I apologise for my late arrival? I hope I didn't miss anything. I was about 5 minutes late at the start. This is fascinating. The project, the contribution that you have shown in this 1 hour has, I'm sure, opened a lot of eyes in the room who are not from the Jewish community, and indeed those who are from the Jewish community, about the Jewish contribution. Bernard very rightfully said during his presentation, when he was talking about a particular aspect, he says that that's maybe something for another dialogue. That I couldn't agree more. And you look at this project, and I see this as a beginning. It's in no way complete. You've just fired the starting pistol here, and there's a lot more work that can be done here, and that can be put together to demonstrate the contribution that the Jewish community has made in Northern Ireland. That whole work, it not only gives a sense of pride to the community, it gives the next generation a lot of information. As you quite rightly said, Stephen, this is not just about us patting ourselves on the back here with something that we've done. It's about preserving everything we've done. The partnership that you have with PRONI, as an organisation, we work very closely with PRONI, as Lorraine would know, and I see David Huddleston's in the room as well, which is good to see. All of that work is preserved forever, which is absolutely vital and important. And my own family has quite a good connection with the Jewish community. We lived on the Lansdowne Road for about 20 years. My uncle and aunt still lived there, and we would have shopped regularly in Levy's. Izzy Enlander was a very, very good friend of my late father,
Well, thank you, Mukesh, and thank you for your very encouraging and heartwarming words. And yes, let's build on this as the Jewish community and with all our friends, as you said, Mukesh, from around the world, in addition to Northern Ireland itself. It's a wonderful story, and it's a good story, I think, for Northern Ireland to get out there. So I want to say thank you to everyone for tuning in today. Huge thank you to Lindsay, who has been behind the scenes directing us all. It has been a wonderful afternoon, and thank you everyone for your support. So I wish everyone, as I started, to wish you all Chanukah Sameach, which is a joyful Chanukah. Thank you very much indeed.